All right. So we are with Andrea Monteverdi. She is a PhD student in our counselor education program. She's also a student in this class. And she's agreed to be interviewed because she works with couples. And since this is a couple and family class, I thought that this would be perfect. So I just wanted to start with maybe just give an overview of how you got into working with couples.
Yeah, I would love to. So it was definitely unexpected. I don't know a whole lot of people who from the very beginning of like being an undergrad in psychology are like, I want to work with couples. I feel like you just kind of stumble your way into it, which is what at least happened for me. So I have an undergrad in psychology, and then I came back to Houston and I went to St. Thomas and I was getting my master's. And I was getting to the point where we were about to pick our first internship site. And one of my professors, he is a sex therapist and a sex psychologist. And so it was a completely different class. It was a diagnosis class. But one day he came in and he did his own presentation all about sex therapy. And he was like, I don't really think that this gets talked about a lot in our profession. So I'm going to present on this today. And I found myself just fascinated by it. And all of my peers were kind of uncomfortable. And I was like, no, this is awesome. This is cool. Like, I didn't even know this was like a niche in our profession. And so after class, I talked to him and I was like, do you know like where I could intern to learn more about this? Like, I think I would really love to do this. And so he put me in connection with Houston Relationship Therapy, which, as the name suggests, most of the clients are couples and families, and also individuals who have relational issues or sexual issues. So I went over there, and during my first internship, I got to also do my certified sex therapist training, which was an incredible experience. Full transparency, it's kind of pricey. It's kind of a big commitment. We did it every weekend for like several months, and it was 48 hours, but you learned so much. And so I fell in love with that in that moment. And it was kind of a christening by fire. I started seeing couples and I was like, ooh, like this is very high energy. You kind of have to be on your toes. You never really know what to expect. But I just found myself pulled more and more towards it. And I felt like I was doing a good job. And so I was like, I think this is kind of my niche. And so I've been doing it for 4 years now.
Wow, that is so wonderful. I know it's so hard to work with couples. I still haven't decided if that's what I really want to do.
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with it. So it's so exciting to hear someone that it's their niche,
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there a particular approach other than what you learned in the sex therapy that you use with your clients?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's still similar to even my individual theoretical orientation, which is narrative therapy. I transfer that into my work with couples. And the way I kind of visualize that is I visualize it as having 3 stories in front of me. This is going to be with, let's just say I'm working with a couple of 2 people. So each individual has their story, but then there's also this joint story of the relationship. And I find that we run into a lot of problems in the relationship if that joint story isn't quite matching up anymore. So then it's kind of like, all right, let's figure out like what chapter we lost one another at, and let's rewind and let's start rewriting to create a story, a joint story that feels like it's inclusive of your individual stories and also feels like it's going to propel you into your future chapters in a way that you appreciate and that sits well with you. So I think of that as kind of like the soil of my flower bed. Like that's my ground. But then I also have like these flowers that pop out of it. And those flowers for me are some Gottman. So I'm level 2 Gottman trained. And I do incorporate things like the dreams within conflict, fondness and admiration, sound relationship house, all those goodies, especially for my clients who are a little bit more concrete. I find that's super helpful. And then in addition to that, I really like EFT, which is emotionally focused therapy. And I think that's a beautiful way of getting people to kind of step out of that logical brain and the thinking brain that we're often comfortable using and really pushing them into like, okay, but what do you feel? And how do these feelings interplay in this relationship to sometimes create kind of a gridlock conflict, and we're not really understanding what the deeper need is. So then we end up in this perpetual like infinity loop of conflict. And so when we label that, we can change it because we have awareness of it.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. So you find that EFT and Gottman really work well together.
Yes, I think that they balance so well because of how different they are, that it allows me to kind of meet my clients where they are and how they visualize things, and it can still challenge them. So I actually find that they work really well together.
Okay, great. So if someone was interested in working with couples, and they didn't know where to start, what would you tell them?
So I would suggest actually starting with podcasts. Esther Perel had a podcast called Where Should We Begin? And so when I was doing my master's, it was like near the end of it, it was COVID time. So podcasts were like all the rage, right? While we're going on our walks and have nothing else to do with life. So I ran into this podcast and I think it's incredible because it's so unique that you are truly listening in on Esther Perel, who is, I think she's an LMFT. She is doing work with couples and you get to listen to how she interacts with them. So I think that
Oh,
that's a
wow.
beautiful introduction into kind of seeing like, do I vibe with this? Is this something I'm interested in? And if you find yourself gobbling up all the podcasts, maybe this really is something that you're interested in. If you find that it's too chaotic, maybe it's not a good fit for you. But I think it's very unique to kind of like be a fly on the wall and listen in on that. Also, I think it's on Amazon Prime. There's a show called Couples Therapy, and it's a very similar situation where it's couples who have consented to being recorded, and it's true couples therapy. It's really cool. I was actually watching it with my partner, and he was loving it, and I was like, I can't watch this anymore. I can't watch this anymore. Like, this is literally what I do all day. I'm getting burnt out, but it's very. It's a great example of what it really looks like. And then outside of that, I think that so for master's level students, if you're doing your internships, I would really suggest like do one internship, maybe somewhere completely different, like working with kids or in a clinical setting. And then if you do think you're interested with kids or working with couples, do your second internship there and really try it. But do try something else as well so that you can compare and you can kind of check in with yourself, like, where do I feel like I fit in this kind of therapy world? Also, mentors have been such a big part in my development that I definitely think if you found like a couples therapist on Instagram or TikTok or something that you like, reach out, learn about their story, learn about how they do things and where they started.
Wow, that is all great advice. So Esther Perel, I got to see her speak at TAMFT one
Fangirl.
year. I don't know what year it was, if it was 2018 or 19. It was pre-COVID. And I got one of her books and she was phenomenal. I did not know she had that podcast, so I am going to be looking for that. That is great. And that advice is really good, that if you're gobbling it up, it's something that you're interested in. And I gobble anything up like that. Another good podcast is The Leading Edge. Have you heard of that one?
Have not.
It's about EFT.
Oh, okay, noted. Who
Yeah.
the leading edge?
Yeah. And I'm trying to, and they're big names. My mind is escaping me right now. George, dang, I cannot remember, but it is so good. I listen to those over and over and over. So I love it.
I'm
Yeah.
excited. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I like the idea of experimenting with internship sites and maybe trying out an internship site working with couples. Is there anything else that you would recommend someone just starting out? Maybe if they weren't in school and they were interested in, what would be the top things that they would need to do just to get in the door and start working with couples?
To get in the door and start working with couples, to be like prepared to work with couples.
Mm-hmm.
I would say be really strong in your own orientation, like be familiar with how that looks also in a couple's dynamic, not just in an individual dynamic, but how does that kind of translate for you? I find that a lot of people who are starting off working with couples have found Gottman training to be really helpful because it does give you that nice structure to feel very secure. But aside from that, I think that you have to be so mindful to not be triangulated by the energy that exists in the room. So let's say that I have a couple in front of me. It can be really, really easy if I'm not kind of checking in with myself to be like, oh, you know what? I'm totally with the husband on this one and then want to like lean towards him, or have a woman who wants to be like woman to woman with me and wants me to pull towards her. So I think just really being comfortable with checking in with yourself, kind of doing that dual process of, okay, let me hold empathy for what's happening for them, but also the ability to check in with myself simultaneously. I think that that's a great place to start. And you can do that when you're not even working with couples, but when you're in a conversation with anybody of how am I reacting and how am I showing up with this person.
Excellent. Okay, that's very helpful. So, do you have any stories that you would want to share?
Couples are fun, so I
Yeah.
feel like there's just like so many stories. I'll start with like a positive story.
Okay.
So I think something that's really unique with doing couples counseling is a lot of my clients started with me when they were in premarital counseling. And so 4 years later, I'm working with a lot of the same couples, way lower frequency. They come in for like quarterly, we call them tune-ins or checkups. And then obviously if there's like a big life change or crisis, then I'm already caught up. They come in for a few sessions, then we get you back into your maintenance space. But by doing that, I've had such an honor of getting to watch these couples evolve from dating to engagement to getting married to now I have so many babies coming into my office from my premarital couples. And I just think that that's the coolest thing to have been with these people and to see their family grow and to now see them entering into these different life cycles, which I had so much fun with that assignment because I was like, this is what's happening for them. So I think that that's a cool thing to consider as a couples therapist, of like, you're watching a family change and evolve and develop and grow. And so seeing that has been just absolutely incredible. Getting emails of it's a girl and all of this
Oh,
thing.
wow.
Yeah, that was a recent one. On the other end, some not so fun things that have happened. For example, I had a couple who we had been working together for over 2 years. And the male presented with a flavor of narcissism. And so when working with that, you have to be really careful to not kind of over align with that client in an effort to not lose them, but to also not challenge them too hard to once again not lose them. Because if you lose one person in the couple, now you're not really creating change within the relationship dynamic. So in this situation, referred both people for individual therapy as well, to kind of not be like, you need to go to therapy, just you over here, but like, both of us, maybe we should do individual therapy. But in the couples work one day, there was some emotional escalation that happened and the male ended up leaving the room. And so I think this is a helpful one to hear because it does happen, like your clients can leave the room. So he got frustrated, he left the room. And so I just waited for a few minutes. The client ended up coming back in, primarily because he didn't want the other partner to have kind of ownership over the story and he didn't want to look badly. But I think that it is helpful because in those situations, of course, on the inside, I'm like, oh my God, like he just walked out of the room and stormed out, but you have to just remain calm, trust your training, trust your skill. Came back in, we were able to repair the conflict that had happened and continuing on. Another story of something that happened, and I'm kind of going with like the scary ones, but there's so many positive ones as well. I was working with a couple and the male client came in and he had visible like recent wounds on his arm. So then when I was assessing for self-harm, there was suicidal intent, planning on leaving the session. He was going to go commit suicide. And so remaining really calm in that situation, I was able to I always keep my phone somewhere within arm's reach in case I need it. Grabbed my phone, said I was going to grab with some water just so we can cool down, called 911, called an ambulance, and had to just try my best to keep the client from leaving. And I did share with him that I had called, the ambulance was on its way. But in those situations, I think it's a great reminder for all clinicians to remember that like your safety also matters as much as we love our clients and we want to keep them safe. Ultimately, like you have to consider your own safety.
Right. No, that's really good advice. So, all right. Thank you. Is there anything else that you think that students should know if they're interested in this?
I think the biggest thing is if you love it, you love it. Like I find it so energizing. I can kind of compare how I show up in a couple session versus an individual session. And right now my caseload is actually pretty split 50-50, which is the most individuals I've had. But you can kind of check in with yourself and you can tell that difference of how does it feel to have 2-3 people in my room here with me versus just one. And it's a totally different energy, but I find that allows it to to keep me on my toes and to keep me fresh and to keep it always learning. And so I think for students to take away the idea of the learning never stops. It truly does not. I promise, there's always something you want to learn. But also remembering that it's not your job to fix people's problems. Like, you're there to support them in their own journeys, in their own healing. And so some days when you get wrapped up in the conflict and you're kind of beating yourself after a session, being like, dang, I really missed this opportunity. Just remember, like, don't work harder than your client. Remember to care for yourself. Remember that you're doing the best that you can, and to be gentle with yourself, because with couples work, it can be easy to get wrapped into it.
That is very true. And it's also easy to blame yourself if a couple didn't stay together. Like, if they wanted to divorce or separate, that is a resolution. I mean, it's not maybe what ideally you would want to happen if they're coming to you, but they're not on the fence anymore. I mean, and I think helping couples come to what is best for them is really important too.
That is such a good point, and honestly, something I wish that someone like at an earlier stage would have explained to me as well. For example, I saw like this, she was a couples counselor, and on her website, she has like a 99% success rate of keeping couples together, something crazy like that. And I was like, whoa, this is not good. Like, this is not the goal. And I find that it's helpful to even share that with clients of, hey, my goal isn't to keep you together. My goal is to help you figure out what is best for y'all.
Right.
And to support that. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because when I started out, I thought, oh, I failed. I didn't, they got a divorce, and my supervisor would have to tell me, no, you didn't fail. I mean, also, you can't take on the success or failure of your client.
Right.
That is about them. You can work on your skills, but what they do in their life is ultimately their decision.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. Anything else? I mean, we're just kind of speeding through these questions, but yeah, anything else that you would want to share?
I truly think that like mentorship and seeking opportunities to kind of dip your toes into it and to hear from other people's experiences. And if you have the opportunity to either like watch tapes of people doing couples counseling or to like sit in with like a supervisor, it's really, really helpful. Also, when you consider who is going to be like your LPCA or LMFT supervisor, can take that into consideration of like, what population do you want to work with and how do they align with that population? For example, my supervisor is a certified sex therapist supervisor, and I chose her specifically for that because while training programs can be so helpful, it is different once you're in the field. And so having someone who has been in the field who can work with you and support you in these additional certifications that you look for, or these niches that you end up in, I think that is so valuable.
Oh, that's great advice. Yeah. So do you practice in Houston?
Yes. I'm at Heights Family Counseling, which is super fun. So it's a private practice, but it's a group private practice. And so we have a really strong sense of community here. We do small group consultations twice a month, which is super beneficial as well. Yeah, I love it.
That's great. Yeah. Huntsville doesn't have as many opportunities. So I would encourage anyone interested to kind of head towards Houston, at least if you're going to be in that area. Otherwise, Dallas or Austin, bigger cities, you're going to have more opportunities for sure.
Yes, which we do accept internship students here as well. We have some supervisors. Yeah, I think we actually have a Sam Houston one, or we just finished with the Sam Houston one last semester, but it's fun. And we have all different types of niches, people who work with kids only, everything.
That's wonderful. All right. Well, I just want to thank you for taking this time out of your busy schedule. I know you're so busy, and taking this time out of also, you don't get credit for this in the class or anything. You just did it out of the kindness of your heart. And I just really appreciate that.
I'm so happy to. Thank you for asking me, inviting me to.
Yeah, you bet. So I'm going to pause the recording now. So bye, everyone. Thank you for joining in. And